Before we get into Freeza properly, I did want to mention that for whatever reason, all my previous patch notes videos have been rendering at 24 frames per second. It was something to do with my project settings in my video editing software. I've since rectified it, and then everything else going forward should be rendered at 60 frames per second. Not sure if anybody noticed that, and it only took me just looking at some of the numbers when I was rendering the Teen Gohan video to realize something was wrong. So anyways, hopefully that's addressed and fixed. Let's get into Freeza properly. Freeza's 5LLL on block used to be -5. And this includes at far range. So basically, this is sort of just, it was an option, but if the opponent caught it, Freeza would be at a slight disadvantage. You could follow up into a special move, things like that. And I want to kind of explore the situation when it comes to his Golden Freeza form because of the implications of it. So previously, if you were in Golden Freeza and you did 5LL at like full screen, mid screen, something like that, and the opponent blocked it, then you try to follow up with a 5M, this would be the result. The opponent would be able to mash on you. Depending on your timing, of course. But regardless of say, there was a gap here. And we can see that that would also be the case off of your 5S using this attack as well. Something that you could also do in his base form. Now let's compare how the 5LLL on block behaves in the current patch. Up close, it's pretty much the same thing. However, when you hit it with this attack at a long range, they increase the attack's level, as well as increase the hit stop on the opponent on a long range block. So now Freeza here is plus 20, which basically means he gets, a relatively uncontested Destructo Disc setup. He could jail into any of his special moves. And of course, if you go Golden Freeza, you now have a gapless block string into your 5M that the opponent can't reversal out of, can't mash out of, like nothing like that. You just get in pretty much for free. So kind of a crazy thing to sort of consider here. Although granted, you usually see this when it comes to combo routing and stuff like that, but this might actually not be that bad of a neutral tool to just mash out with. After all, you get pretty much free projectile or even full screen follow-ups depending on what form you have Freeza in. I also want to take this moment just to highlight that why is this called Golden Freezer? It was like this in patch 1.38 as well. How long has this been called Golden Freezer in the English version of the game? Like, does anyone have an answer to this? I've never realized it was called Golden Freezer before. Anyways, that's my fun little thing. Let's take a look at Freeza's standing medium attack. So there was basically one version of this move in the previous patch. It was 13 frames startup up close, which is quite slow for a medium. It was also -6 on block. At farther ranges, it would cross the screen at about frame 22, and again reach full screen, while still being -6 on block. Now, because of all this, it could be a little bit weird to add into combos sometimes. Now, obviously, it will work pretty much off of that hit right there. It will also work off of, pretty much every single hit that you would want it to work off of, even off of your 5L, of course, thanks to the virtue of the hit stun. But if you want to do some fancier things, like, say, link this jump medium here, well, and if you were in your base form, there really wasn't a whole lot that you were able to accomplish with this previously. Now looking at the buffs to standing medium attack, it is faster. Frame 12 startup now, so still a little bit like slow or on par with some other mediums now. And you'll also note that they've reduced the delay by a single frame, so instead of being -6, Freeza is now actually -5, meaning he can safely stagger off of his 5M. They've also adjusted the distance moved, so it does take him a little bit longer to reach here, which could affect some of his combo play. But you'll also note that if he does this, he's actually plus on block now. So previously, if you use this move to get in and you just stopped at that, well, you were negative. But now you're actually plus on block with Freeza, which is kind of crazy. And this, I think, has to do with changes the behavior of the attack when the attack startup is delayed. But that also leads into another point where Freeza has two versions of 5M now. If you just press 5M, you get this version. But if you press 4M, well, then you get this intentionally delayed version of 5M. And it still has like these same properties on block, compared to the 5M version at long distances. So they're both, -5 up close. But this namely has some applications in terms of planning out his combo route. Like, because of the fact that, this is a faster move, they made it so you could delay it so that you can get some of that older timing still. And if you actually see when you hit them late with this, you get a little bit more hit stun. Enough hit stun, actually, where if I do the normal version of the move, instant air dash and jump medium, it doesn't work. But if I do the other version, and if I do it correctly, I'm actually able to link a JM there. And not only that, because of a change to JM we'll talk about later, you actually are able to get even more than just this in terms of some of your follow-ups, which we'll actually explore a little later when we explore some of the Freeza tech at the end of the video. 5S also has a couple of buffs. So previously, each shot did about 300 damage base value, and then of course with scaling, they would do a little bit less. But 300 was their base damage. In addition to that, Freeza also only had 1 speed of a Ki Blast previously. And it was a decently fast Ki Blast, but I mean, only a few frames faster than some of the other Ki Blasts that were in the game, so pretty standard overall. As you can see, changing your input didn't really affect the Ki Blasts themselves in terms of their behavior. If you held 6 as well, then you'd only get the 1 Ki Blast firing. If you wanted to fire multiples of them, you had to hold neutral, and if you held back or forward at any point, it would instantly stop your Ki Blast string. Looking at the buffs to his Ki Blast, they do more damage now. 450, so an increase of 150 damage compared to the previous version of the game. So you actually can get quite a substantial chunk of damage off of this move. Not only that, they've also made it so that you can change the speed of the Ki Blast. So previously, you always had like this full screen frame 21 Ki Blast. But if I hold back, as I fire it, you'll see that the subsequent blast hit at frame 23. Whereas if I hold forward, you basically have a 6S version of the Ki Blast, hitting at frame 18 from full screen. Meaning that this is actually faster than quite a lot of Ki Blasts now, and gives you some combo potential, gives you some like varying neutral and stuff like that. I imagine if you're just trying to hit the opponent ASAP, you're going to do this 6S version to catch them as soon as possible, compared to, slowing it down. But this is going to be something where the Freeza tech lords like KJ Pixel are really going to be able to analyze and break down what version of this 5S is going to be the best version for you to use given the situation. Looking at his 1, 2, and 3 Ki Blast attacks, Freeza used to just kind of remain pretty stationary throughout all of these moves. He would obviously move a little bit, going backwards on 3S and 2S, and only slightly forward on his 3S. Of course, there were ways that you would be able to use these in particular combos. As a very basic example, if you did 3S after his 2 heavy, then you were able to link the I-beams and still follow up with Super Dash. Just as a very basic example, there's a lot more technical examples to go over with Freeza when it comes to the I-beams and where you could use them in combos. Now let's take a look at how Bandai has changed the Crouching Unique Attack series. On his 1S and 3S, they increased the amount of distance Freeza moves, and it's quite substantial. Freeza basically, leaps across the screen now, using both of those attacks. His 2S remains pretty much the same. Now this does impact some of his existing combo routes, like if I do 2 heavy into 3S, for example, you'll see that it no longer works. And from my testing here as well, it's not like the 2S works, and the 1S certainly doesn't work due to the angle. But there are some new things and opportunities that Freeza does have, so Freeza players are going to be having to explain what Freeza can't do anymore and what Freeza can do anymore. As we go over the next change, we're actually going to be looking at some combo route changes to Freeza overall for the patch. Another change for Freeza comes to his jumping medium attack. Previously, there was a little bit of stun time, but not all that much. As you can see, Goku would tech out very quickly, and so if we looked at a combo like this, that wouldn't really work in that case. And if you were going into some sort of air looping and stuff, well, then things could get a little tricky for you to take advantage of it. Getting into jump mediums change specifically, they've increased the stun time for the initial attack. So if you hit with that first part of the move, right? Courtesy of Lonkertons on Twitter, we can see the particularly stylish example of some of the combos you can do with Freeza and this new loop. Opportunity, of course, comes from Cremesis, the Cursed King. There are a lot of elements going on here, but right here is a result of the buff to JM, so you're actually able to link this 2M here. And then getting this advancing hit with the change to 3S so that Freeza leaps forward like this. And then you get this jump cancel as well. So that's 2 instances where some of the patch changes have directly influenced Frieza's combo game. Another demonstration courtesy of the Cursed King, we can see that Freeza has access to this loop in some of his sparking combo routing as well. So more potential applications for this loop. There's even applications for going into this loop off of a 5 heavy launcher. So Freeza can actually do some high damage rejump combos following that smash launcher. Some pretty cool stuff. And one side effect of the change to the I-beam routes is the fact that you can now actually get a consistent link into the discs without needing a delay. So again, the Cursed King here. Again, some pretty cool routing opportunities for Freeza. What's actually going to be the tournament stable and viable stuff, I think is going to take us a little bit of time to see, but there's a lot to sort of unravel with these changes to Freeza. Frieza's last change is to his jumping unique attack, where it used to have pretty decent landing recovery before. In total, if I whiff the move, like immediately off the ground, I could be like -34 with Freeza, taking my time. And if the opponent blocked it, and I chose to do nothing, GT Goku might not be a good example to test this with. You know, you would be -9 previously. So JS was buffed by having its recovery reduced. So instead of Freeza being like -9 in the previous example, he can instead be +5, as we see there, depending on if you hit it there, or -4. I've seen this get about like -6, -5 range. The most match practical example I can really think of for this mattering is if he goes for his cross-up JL, which he usually confirms into JS. If it's blocked, he can just do JS stop and then, you know, be -5, pretty safe. In fact, he's just guaranteed safe here as opposed to -9 and running the risk of eating some sort of punish in case the character has a normal that reaches that far in 9 frames. So instead of Frieza having to like hit confirm and then keep himself covered, he could instead stop the pressure here and be safe. But there were already sort of ways that he could do this in the first place. Things like, you know, canceling this into a jump heavy, seeing that, and then, you know, being safe off of that. So I'm not entirely sure if there's any sort of like other function that this buff really gives Frieza. I messed around with this in the corner a bit, and it looks like there's something almost here with like going for some sort of rejump after it, but I haven't been able to make this work, and maybe it's an execution thing on my part, but it feels like there's just not enough hits done in order for Frieza to link a jump light there. But maybe there's some other routing that you could look at doing here. You might be able to fit this in on routes where you're utilizing the disc, right? And then being able to recover and block those discs sometimes. So there might be some very niche applications of this buff that I'm not aware of, but still, it's there. I can see some sort of surface level benefit for it, but I feel like, at least with regards to using it to keep his mix-up game a little bit safer, it definitely feels like there's probably more that could be like done for that case, or at least there was already answers to it rather. But you know, if there's any sort of tech that you've been able to find with this JS buff, do let us know. There might be something I'm missing. Overall, Freeza's probably a little bit better in this patch. The fact that he has mid-screen loops without Golden Freeza improves his corner carry, his damage, his 5M is also just a lot more threatening since, you know, if he closes the gap on you, he's just plus in your face. That's kind of a crazy change. So the zoner actually has the ability to sort of rush you down. The fact that he can also just like lock you down to set up more projectile zoning means that you can kind of just, you know, maybe throw this move out at times. Though, again, full screen is going to be where this has a bit more of an application. Whether or not this is going to be something that you can safely do at high level play where everybody's throwing out high priority moves and all other crazy things, I think has sort of yet to be seen, but there's certainly some applications for it. He is going to be a little bit different, especially because of the changes to his crouching unique attacks. The range of them fundamentally messing around with some of his old combo confirms, especially his Golden Frieza confirms. Is going to be something for Frieza players to adjust to. But, you know, if you lose some of those routes and lose some of the damaging golden form, having your base form be better just by virtue of the new loops you get in mid-screen and even in the corner with that probably makes up for it. I would definitely say that Frieza is certainly different, and all of his most important changes have already been implemented before. He does have a few new tools to play with, and he does appreciate the fact, too, that he gains a second safe on block medium to stagger his pressure with, opening up just more opportunities for him to keep the offense going against the opponent. So, Frieza, still a very technical character. Highly recommend that you all be checking out any sort of the Twitter users like Cremisis or KJ Pixel for more Frieza tech down the line.